She was the highest-ranking officer on base. He was just the janitor with grease on his hands and a past no one remembered. But when she joked, "Fly this helicopter and I'll marry you," she never expected him to actually start the engine, and with it, unravel everything she thought she knew. What follows isn't just a flight. It's a journey through grief, redemption, and the second chances we all hope life might still give us. Before we begin, if stories of quiet heroes healing hearts and unforgettable twists speak to you, consider subscribing to Soul Moment Story. We share faceless films that lift the spirit and remind us all that kindness, courage, and family still matter. Let's begin. The late afternoon sun dripped gold over the helipad of Fort West Point Air Base. The air shimmered with heat, the metallic scent of jet fuel hanging heavy as the rhythmic thump of distant rotors faded into the horizon. Major Bella Monroe stood with her arms crossed, her shadow slicing through the yellow landing ring beneath her boots. Around her, a dozen soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, whispering like kids before a storm. The base's only flight-ready Black Hawk sat motionless, its rotors glinting under the sun. Inside the cockpit, the pilot seat was empty. Its owner, Captain Ruiz, had been rushed to the infirmary minutes ago after a hydraulic line explosion left his arm torn and bleeding. The upcoming VIP inspection flight had just turned into a logistical nightmare. Bella's jaw flexed. "We've got 10 minutes before the general's helicopter arrives," she barked. "Where's my backup pilot?" A young lieutenant flipped through his clipboard. "Ma'am, no one on duty's cleared for Black Hawk Class B. Ruiz was the only one certified today." Her eyes flared. "Then find someone who is. I don't care if he's retired or in a museum." A low, calm voice rose from behind the maintenance shed. "I can fly it." The soldiers turned as one. Out from the shadow stepped a man in oil-stained coveralls gloves, still on mop leaning against his shoulder. His hair was longer than regulation. His sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms lined with faded scars. The maintenance tag on his chest read, "L. Brooks." A ripple of laughter broke across the deck. You're the janitor, man," one soldier snorted. Another added, "Yeah. What are you gonna do? Wipe the windshield. Clean midair." Even Bella allowed herself a sharp exhale, half irritation, half disbelief. "Mr. Brooks, is it?" she said, coolly walking toward him. "You're a technician, not a pilot." He looked up, meeting her eyes steadily. "Ma'am, I was a pilot." Once. The confidence in his tone, quiet, unforced, stilled the laughter for a beat. Bella's brow arched. "Oh, really? And which YouTube channel certified you?" More laughter. Someone whistled mockingly. Liam didn't flinch. He just placed the mop aside and wiped his hands on his coveralls. "I can get her in the air and back safely." "That's all that matters, isn't it?" Bella tilted her head, studying him. There was something infuriatingly calm about him. Something that didn't match the grease on his hands or the faded patch sewn to his sleeve, the old insignia of the 160th SOAR, the elite Night Stalkers. She recognized it instantly, though she said nothing. "All right," she said, after a pause, a wry smile tugging her lips. "Tell you what, Mr. Brooks, if you can fly this Black Hawk, I'll personally pin a medal on you." She leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough for the others to hear. "Heck, I'll even marry you." The deck erupted in laughter. Liam didn't laugh. He simply nodded once. "Then I'll hold you to your word, ma'am." The soldiers jeered louder, egging him on as he walked past them. But the moment he placed his hand on the cold steel of the Black Hawk's door, the mood shifted. His expression changed, his gaze sharpened like a blade being unsheathed. Bella felt it too, the subtle but unmistakable aura of command. Inside the cockpit, he moved with muscle memory, his hands brushing each control, each lever, like he'd never left. The switches clicked in perfect sequence, his eyes flicking across the panels as the familiar scent of hydraulic oil and metal filled the air. Outside, the laughter began to fade. Pre-ignition check complete, he murmured to himself. Voice calm. Hydraulics. Clear. Fuel flow. Good. Bella stood frozen by the nose of the helicopter. The sunlight caught the outline of his face, focused steady, completely in his element. The first whir of the ignition broke the silence. The rotor began to spin slow at first, then faster, slicing the air into crescents of light. The wind kicked up dust and papers flapping the sleeves of the soldiers, who now stood speechless. Is he actually? One whispered. He's really doing it. Another breathed. Bella's hand went instinctively to her headset. Blackhawk 05. You are not cleared for copy. That Liam's voice interrupted steady over the comms. But we both know clearance is the least of our problems right now. The rotors roared the deck, trembling beneath her heels. Within seconds, the helicopter lifted gracefully off the pad, rising into the amber sky, like a sleeping giant remembering its power. Bella shielded her face from the downdraft, her heart racing. The helicopter hovered stable, the kind of stability no simulator could fake. Then, with a slight pitch adjustment, it began a slow, perfect circle above the base. The sunset caught the spinning blades, scattering light across the clouds like shattered glass. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the mocking soldiers were silent, their mouths half open, eyes wide. In the cockpit, Liam's expression softened. He wasn't showing off. He was home. His fingers moved with elegance, precision, the mark of a man who once trusted his life to the sky. The vibrations of the engine resonated through his chest, like an old heartbeat returning to rhythm. From below, Bella watched in awe. The sight stirred something buried deep within her, the same awe she'd felt as a little girl watching her brother's unit fly rescue missions across stormy seas. When Liam landed the helicopter minutes later, the rotors slowing to a steady hum, no one laughed anymore. He climbed out his boots, hitting the deck with quiet authority. The wind caught his hair, and for the first time, Bella noticed the look in his eyes. Not pride, not arrogance, but a haunting calm. She approached him, voice quieter now. Where did you learn to fly like that? He met her gaze. Fort Campbell. Night Stalkers. Her breath caught. The name hit like a memory. Her brother's last radio transmission had mentioned being rescued by a Night Stalker pilot years ago, the same mission that had saved 50 lives and taken one. She studied him anew, her earlier mockery, dissolving into uneasy respect. Around them, the soldiers exchanged looks, the reality settling in. The janitor wasn't a janitor at all. Bella folded her arms, hiding the tremor in her voice. Well, Mr. Brooks, she said. Forcing composure looks like I owe you a medal, he smiled faintly. Or a wedding, ma'am. Depends on which promise you're keeping. A ripple of laughter broke the tension this time, softer, admiring. Even Bella let out a short, reluctant laugh, though her cheeks flushed pink. As Liam walked away, mop in hand once again, she couldn't take her eyes off him. Something about him didn't fit the ground he walked on. He moved like a man who still carried the sky inside him. Above them, the fading sun dipped below the horizon, bathing the deck in fire and gold. The wind carried the last echo of the rotor blades, a sound not of machinery, but of resurrection. And in that fading light, Bella Monroe, the youngest major at West Point, felt something she hadn't in years, curiosity. She whispered under her breath, almost smiling. Who are you, really? Liam Brooks. The mop clinked softly as he disappeared down the corridor, leaving behind the scent of jet fuel and a sky that suddenly didn't feel so distant anymore. The next morning, the tarmac was slick with dew. Low clouds drifted lazily overhead, casting shifting shadows over Fort West Point's southern helipad. A faint hum buzzed beneath the usual bustle, as if the airbase itself was still processing what had happened the evening before. Major Bella Monroe sat alone in the co-pilot seat of the same Black Hawk arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the cockpit controls she thought she knew inside and out. But last night had changed everything. Across from her, Liam Brooks moved through his pre-flight checks in silence, sleeves rolled up, every motion measured. He hadn't said much since arriving at dawn in the same worn coveralls. No swagger, no arrogance, just quiet competence. Bella finally broke the silence. "You're not on the official flight manifest." "I know," he replied, flicking a switch. "General's orders. Something about making sure you trust the bird again." She clicked her tongue, but said nothing. It wasn't lost on her that the general had intervened. Word of Liam's stunt had swept through the base like wildfire. Officers who once ignored him now whispered behind clipboards. Recruits stared. Liam started the engines. The familiar whump-whump-whump of the rotor blades cut through the morning fog. As the Black Hawk lifted off the ground, Bella's shoulders stiffened. "Comfortable?" he asked, eyes forward. "I don't make it a habit to sit in aircraft flown by janitors." He gave a small smile. "Good thing I'm not one." They rose into the open sky, the mist parting around them like curtains. The world below shrank away, runways, hangars marching cadets, until it was just sky and silence. Bella tried not to be impressed, but she felt it again. The same smooth elegance in his control. The rotors didn't fight him. They obeyed like he was drawing music from a violin. Every motion, every tilt of the nose or shift in altitude was precise, flawless. She cleared her throat. "When did you last fly?" Liam's eyes didn't leave the horizon. 6 years, 3 months, 17 days ago. She blinked. "You remember the exact day? It was the last time I flew with her." The words lingered in the cabin, suspended in the air like fog that refused to lift. Bella turned slightly. "With who, my wife?" Silence again, but heavier, now thick with memory. He continued softly. "She was at the base when I took off for a mission in Kandahar. Mechanical failure forced an emergency landing. I made it out." She didn't. Bella lowered her gaze. "I'm sorry." He shrugged lightly. "You don't have to be. Most people just stop asking." She let the words sit for a beat. "I wasn't asking to make small talk." "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I answered." They flew on. The clouds began to thin, revealing the jagged ridgelines of the Appalachians below. Birds scattered in their wake. Bella's voice dropped lower. "I've seen your record now. You were with the 160th SOAR, weren't you?" Liam's lips pressed into a thin line. "I was. You flew extraction for downed SEAL teams and triple black ops. That's not janitor-level work." He didn't reply. She pushed a little more. "Why hide it? Why let people think you're a nobody?" He met her eyes for the first time in the flight. Because being a hero's exhausting, major. People expect miracles every day. But a janitor, no one asks him to fly into fire. She didn't know what to say to that. Below, the earth began to glow with sunlight breaking through the haze. Liam adjusted the stick, banking left over a river bend. Bella caught a glimpse of a tattoo just below his rolled sleeve, the faint silhouette of a hawk's wing and night sky. She recognized it instantly. "Your unit rescued my brother," once she said almost to herself. Over the Hindu Kush, his bird went down in a canyon. Everyone thought they were gone. But a single night stalker brought them out. Liam said nothing. "His name was Captain Landon Monroe," she added. "You saved him." His hands paused ever so briefly, then back to the controls. "I remember that mission." Bella's voice wavered. "He died 3 years later." "Not in combat." "PTSD. He couldn't sleep without hearing rotors." Liam exhaled through his nose. "War doesn't always kill you in battle." The cabin fell into another stretch of silence, but this one wasn't uncomfortable. It was shared. Understood. They hovered now over a wide lake, the reflection of the helicopter rippling in the still water below. Bella looked out, then back at him. "You fly like you're still part of the sky." His lips twitched. Maybe part of me never landed. She didn't smile, but something in her shoulders softened. Then abruptly, the radio crackled. "Base to Blackhawk 05. You are cleared for return. Weather system moving in from the north." Liam nodded, flipped a few switches. "Copy that. Heading home." On the way back, Bella spoke again, more hesitant this time. "Why did you do it yesterday? Why take the risk just to prove a point?" He didn't answer right away. Then, because for a moment, I saw my son looking at me like I was still someone worth being proud of. That caught her off guard. She turned toward him, really studying his face. There was pain there, yes, but not bitterness. There was a man who had chosen to carry his grief, not to be defined by it. And for the first time in a long while, Bella felt something stir inside her that wasn't anger, control, or guilt. It was curiosity, respect, and maybe something warmer. They touched down on the helipad as the wind began to pick up. Liam powered down the engines, the hum slowly fading into silence. As they climbed out, Bella paused beside him. "I don't believe in coincidences, Mr. Brooks. You showing up when you did. It feels like something's circling back." He looked at her thoughtful. Or maybe it never flew away. She gave a small nod, then turned to leave heels clicking on steel. But halfway across the deck, she stopped and glanced over her shoulder. "I wasn't joking about the marriage thing," she said, smirking. "But I also didn't think you'd actually fly." Liam gave a quiet chuckle. "Then I guess we're both surprising each other, Major." And as she disappeared into the command building, he stood under the sky, same boots, same scars, but something in his chest a little lighter. Somewhere above them, a hawk circled high. After the morning flight base, life reasserted itself with the steady, indifferent rhythm of duty. Trucks rumbled across concrete. Radios snapped with clipped orders. Men and women in uniform moved through their routines, as if the day had not just shifted on its axis. Liam Brooks walked the short distance back to Hangar 6, with his palms still smelling faintly of hydraulic oil and the tang of ozone. He steered clear of questions, returning to the small world he'd built within the base, a narrow maintenance bay, where spare parts lived like relics, and a single folding table served as a workbench dinner table, and when needed, a place to help Mason with his school projects. The bay was cluttered, but purposeful labels on racks, charts on the wall, a battered coffee thermos permanently perched beside a toolbox. Mason met him at the door with a mop of unruly hair and a grin that worked miracles. The boy's eyes were bright as a child's, who had been given permission to believe the impossible. Today he had a paper plane in hand, edges carefully folded, colored with markers. One wing marked Dad in a child's blocky handwriting. "Did you see it, Dad?" Mason blurted, thrusting the plane forward. Did you really fly it?" Liam crouched, taking the plane and turning it over with gentle fingers. "I did," he said, and it flew true. Mason whooped, delighted enough to forget to breathe. He darted around the bay like a small comet, scattering model parts in his wake. Liam watched him, the way his son's knees bumped the underside of the bench, the way he chewed on the string he'd found, the way he still believed absolutely that his father wore the sky like a coat. When the boy was occupied assembling a new tail rotor for a model, Blackhawk, Liam's eyes drifted to the pegboard, where a faded photograph was tucked behind a wrench. It showed him 10 years younger in a flight suit, grinning with crew members, whose faces told stories of nights spent chasing shadows. His hands lingered on the photo for a heartbeat, an old ache tightening in his chest, then loosening as he placed a hand on Mason's shoulder. "Don't promise the clouds all the time," he told the boy, light in his voice, though the old gravity threaded the words. They get jealous. Mason didn't listen. He'd already begun narrating the plane's maiden voyage in a voice that made Liam's eyes go wet. The boy's faith had the stubborn, sunlit quality of small things that insist on being true. Meanwhile, Bella Monroe had left the hangar with a mission humming behind her ribs facts. What she'd seen on the rooftop didn't align with the records on her desk, and that misalignment pricked at every part of her training that demanded order and clarity. She had spent the afternoon in admin, the fluorescent lights throwing a sterile glow over rows of file cabinets, while a young clerk clicked and clacked through search terminals. "Liam Brooks," she said plainly. The clerk frowned. "L. Brooks, hangar tech." "Yes, ma'am. Personnel files minimal. Hired on a civilian contract background check, clean. No aviation certifications on record." Bella's gaze narrowed. No flight logs, no MOS indicating pilot training. Nothing. "There's a civilian contractor badge." "Sir, wait, there is an old sealed file, ma'am. It's flagged restricted. Says, do not release without chain of command sign-off. Looks to be archived under 160th SOAR classified." Her chest tightened. That little official phrasing restricted was a hinge. She'd seen similar stamps on documents in training that hinted at stories written in all caps and black ink. She asked for the file, but the clerk explained protocol. Nothing moved without the general's sign. On her way back, Bella's mind riffed through the possibilities. She was no stranger to secrets. The military ran on them. But secrets with an origin in the 160th SOAR carried weight. People didn't step away from that unit and hang rungs on mop handles unless something had cracked them open. That evening, curiosity tugged at her enough that she took the long route past Hangar 6. The bay lights were warm and solitary, slicing the dark into workmanlike rectangles. She watched from the shadow as Mason and Liam bent over the model helicopter. It was hands-on, intimate, two silhouettes hunched close. Father and son crafting a tiny machine that meant so much more than its scale. Liam's movements were patient, each placement of a screw made with the care of a man aligning something fragile. Mason chattered about aerodynamics with the earnestness of a preacher. Bella found her own breath soften. She stayed longer than she meant to, a witness to a quiet ritual. At one point, Mason leaned across the workbench and asked the question that would plant its seed in Bella's chest. "Will you ever fly again, dear?" His voice was small. Liam's hands paused the screwdriver hovering mid-turn. He met Mason's gaze, and for the first time a shadow passed across his features. Unspoken years folded into that look. "Not everything feels the same when you bring it back," he said gently. "Some things sound louder than they used to. Some things don't want to let go." He set the screwdriver down and folded his hands like a man folding a map he'd read 1,000 times. "But I teach you how to make them fly. That'll do for now." Mason's lip trembled. He nodded, as though he understood that this was the best answer available. Bella watched the exchange the way Liam swallowed a memory with a practiced ease. She saw how precise his hands were, how they didn't tremble when they worked on gears and servos, an old steadiness that suggested someone who'd once trusted their life to a machine, and perhaps trusted it less now. She thought of the engine's roar the night before, how it had dug into something in her chest she'd long left closed. She stepped forward, then deciding that whatever the records hid, whatever the seal on the file represented, there was more truth in the space between a man and his child than in any clipped file. The base had its rules. People had their stories. She cleared her throat, not wanting to startle them. "Your son's got a good eye for lift," she said, voice softer than she'd intended. "You taught him well." Liam straightened, surprised, then smiled one of those small, rueful smiles that made his eyes crease. "He watches too much. He tells me things about the sky I forgot how to notice." Mason beamed. "Major Monroe says you flew for the Night Stalkers. There it was a child's recitation of adult myth. Liam's smile thinned imperceptibly. "Yes," he said, and the word dropped into the bay like a coin. "I flew." Bella felt in that single syllable the outline of a man she wanted to know more about. She thought of the sealed file of the general's intervention, of the way Liam had moved in the cockpit, as if he'd never left. There was an honesty in that movement that no certificate could capture. "Would you?" she started, then corrected herself. The question she wanted to ask was raw and perhaps unfair. Why hide, why mop floors when you could fly? Instead, she offered a safer prompt. "Would you let me see your log sometime, if you're willing?" Liam looked at her, weighing the offer the way pilots weighed crosswinds. He glanced at Mason, who was now pretending to be a squadron of rescue birds on the floor, and then back at Bella. "I don't keep a log," he said simply. "Not the way you mean. But I'll show you what matters." He tapped the model where, beneath the painted paneling, a tiny folded photograph was pinned with a strip of tape. She leaned in. The photograph was worn, edges softened by time. A woman's laugh caught mid-smile a younger Liam beside her, and a little boy who looked like Mason, but perhaps older, both faces sunlit and fearless. The picture was a small universe, a family before everything that followed. Bella felt the file at admin like a puzzle piece she now wanted to fit into place. The man before her didn't want papers. He wanted to stitch himself back into life with his hands and with his son. That night, she walked away with a curiosity that felt dangerously like concern. The sealed file would remain sealed until protocol unwrapped it, but a human truth had unfolded in Hangar 6, a veteran who had walked away from the cockpit, not because he couldn't fly, but because flying had taken something from him he couldn't bear to lose again. The base settled into its night rhythm, and overhead the stars appeared quiet witnesses to a man who kept one foot on the ground and one still reaching for the sky. The following morning arrived with a heavy grayness, the kind that dulled the edges of even the crispest uniform. Clouds hung low over Fort West Point, mirroring the weight sitting in Major Bella Monroe's chest as she stood beside the mess hall coffee station, her untouched mug growing cold in her hand. She hadn't slept much. The image of Liam Brooks and his son hunched over that model helicopter had played on repeat in her mind. The boy's innocent question, "Will you ever fly again?" Dad lingered louder than the Black Hawk's engines. What troubled her more was what she'd found in the records room the night before: nothing. No flight history, no mission logs. Only a sealed, classified file flagged "Do not release without command authorization." And that insignia, 160th SOAR. She'd spent her early career idolizing that unit, the fabled Night Stalkers. Pilots who flew into pitch-black war zones without hesitation, extracting teams under fire with the precision of ghost blades. It took more than just skill to fly with them. It took nerves of steel and a soul that had made peace with the sky's silence. And now she knew Liam Brooks had been one of them. But why had he walked away? Her boots clicked through the rain-slick corridor toward the restricted flight hangars. Her destination wasn't official, and she wasn't exactly cleared for what she was about to do, but she needed answers, and the base's aircraft archives might hold some. Inside the dim hangar, she was greeted by Chief Warrant Officer Alvarez, a retired flight engineer, who now managed the base's decommissioned aircraft inventory. He raised an eyebrow as she approached. "Major Monroe, not often someone of your rank comes snooping around my boneyard." Bella offered a tight smile. "I'm chasing a ghost. Name's Liam Brooks." Alvarez leaned back on his stool. "Now there's a name I haven't heard in a long time. Hell of a pilot. Quiet. Smart. Knew how to listen to a machine like it was speaking English. You knew him. We flew together. Afghanistan. He was on a medevac bird call-signed Hollow Echo. Never missed a beat." Bella paused. Why'd he leave? Alvarez's smile faded. He took off his cap, scratched his bald head. That's not my story to tell. But I'll say this: the day he grounded himself, he walked off a Black Hawk and never stepped foot in one again. Left his wings on the console. Bella's brow furrowed. That's it. He didn't yell, didn't cry, just looked like a man who'd seen too much sky. Alvarez motioned her over to a file cabinet. You didn't hear it from me, but there's an unofficial archive pilots keep. Personal logs, maintenance notes, mission scribble stuff no one reports because the paperwork takes longer than the flight. From the cabinet, he pulled a weathered, leather-bound book. The cover bore a single faded word in black marker Brooks. Bella opened it gently. Inside, flight logs written in neat handwriting spanned years. Not official forms, just raw notes. Mission locations, wind speeds. Call signs, last-minute course corrections. But what stopped her were the margins filled with quotes, memories, even drawings Mason had clearly made over the years. And then a folded page near the back. She unfolded it slowly, heart tightening. July 12, 2017, 1830 hours. Kandahar AO, mission code redemption line. Weather was against us. Evac window tight. I made the call. Flew the bird in early. The engine didn't hold. Emergency landing outside LZ. I lived. She didn't. Her name was Evelyn. She was my north. She asked me once, promise me the sky won't change you. But the sky doesn't change you. It shows you who you really are. Bella swallowed hard. This wasn't a flight log. It was a confession. She gently returned the book, thanked Alvarez, and walked into the open rain. Later that evening, back in the maintenance bay, Liam knelt beside an old engine casing, gently guiding Mason's hands over the mock rotor housing. Counter torque comes from the tail rotor, he explained. Without it, the whole thing spins out of control. Mason looked up, grinning. So it's like, when I get mad and you keep me from punching things, Liam chuckled. Something like that. That's when he heard the footsteps. Bella stood in the doorway, water clinging to her uniform hair pinned back, but her expression softer than he'd ever seen. Mason perked up. Major Monroe. Hey, buddy, she said gently, eyes flicking to Liam. Mind if I borrow your dad for a second? Mason nodded and skipped to the back room, leaving them alone among the steel bones of forgotten birds. Bella took a breath. I read your log. Liam's face changed just slightly. His eyes grew still. She continued. I know about Evelyn, about the mission, about the engine failure. He turned away. That wasn't meant for anyone to read. I know, she said softly. But I had to understand. Silence stretched between them. I was the duty officer who approved that evac window, she said suddenly. Back then, I was just a junior aide, but I signed the authorization code. Liam's shoulders went rigid. She stepped closer, voice trembling. I didn't know the engine hadn't cleared final inspection. I didn't check. I just rubber stamped it. He looked at her now. Not angry, just tired. I've carried it for years, she whispered. Tried to outrun it by being perfect. By burying it in promotions, drills reports. And did it work? He asked. No, she replied. It turned me into someone who forgot how to feel. Until you flew that bird. Liam looked away. You want me to say I forgive you? No, she said quietly. I just needed to stop hiding. He studied her. Then slowly he nodded. Then maybe we're both done hiding. Their eyes met, two soldiers with ghosts between them, each carrying the weight of the same sky. Later that night, Bella found herself alone in her quarters, sitting with a warm cup of tea and a silent question in her chest. What does healing look like for people like us? And across the base, Liam tucked Mason into bed, brushing the boy's hair back as the child mumbled something about rotor blades and cloud highways. Liam kissed his son's forehead, turned off the light, and stood for a long moment in the dark. Outside, a gentle wind swept across the field, rustling the tall grass near the helipad. The past hadn't disappeared. But maybe it had begun to loosen its grip. The air inside the maintenance bay was thick with the scent of machine oil and old metal. It wasn't unpleasant not to Liam Brooks. It was familiar. Grounding. The sharp tang of engine grease had once been his tether to reality during combat deployments, when the world outside the rotor spun out of control, and the only thing that made sense was the thrum of an engine doing what it was built to do. Now he stood alone beside a mothballed Blackhawk parked in the far corner of Hangar 6. Its matte black body bore the faded marks of service its serial numbers worn like scars. This bird had once danced through war zones under cover of night. Now it sat like a sleeping relic, half forgotten by the base, but never by him. The access panels were already off. Liam's hands moved over the internal wiring harnesses, checking for corrosion, not because he had to, but because he needed to keep them alive. Machines had memory. They told you their story if you listened close enough. He didn't hear the footsteps until they were just a few yards away. "Thought I'd find you here," Bella Monroe said quietly. Liam didn't look up. "I figured someone like you had better things to do than stalk a janitor." She ignored the jab, stepping into the soft overhead light, her uniform crisp, even in the dimness. "You're not a janitor, and we both know it," he offered a humorless smile. "You say that now." She tilted her head. "Did you always treat people like they were trespassing in your past? Or is that just reserved for me?" That earned a faint smirk from him. He finally looked at her. "You're persistent. I'll give you that. I'm a Monroe. We don't walk away from unsolved puzzles." Liam arched an eyebrow. "That what I am to you?" Bella hesitated. "You're a man standing inside the shell of something he used to be. And I want to know why." He exhaled slowly, leaning against the open engine bay. "Because memory doesn't die with a person. It hides. In sounds, in metal, in smell." He tapped the side of the helicopter. "This bird." She still remembers her screams. Bella remained quiet, letting him speak. Liam continued, his voice lower. "A week before Evelyn died, I flew this exact model into a combat extraction in Kandahar. Weather was hell. Zero visibility. The rotors iced up mid-flight. I still remember how the stick fought back like it had its own will. We pulled out the team, but the engine took damage. They grounded her after that. Should have scrapped her. Instead, they patched her. Sent her up again. That mission." He stopped, swallowing hard. "She failed you," Bella said gently. "No," he said, meeting her eyes. "I failed her. I saw the wear. I logged the warning. But I let the pressure win. And she died in my place." Bella stepped closer, voice steady. "You were doing your job. You trusted the system." Liam shook his head. "The system doesn't feel guilt at 2 a.m. The system doesn't hear her laugh every time I turn a wrench." Silence stretched between them. Rain tapped gently on the hangar roof, like distant rotors slowing down. Then, from behind a stack of crates, a small voice piped up. Dad Mason peeked out holding a lunchbox. Liam turned, surprised. "Hey, bud, what are you doing here?" "You forgot your sandwich," Mason said proudly. "And I didn't want it to get squished like last time." Bella smiled as Liam walked over and ruffled his son's hair. "You're a good man, Mason," she said warmly. The boy grinned. "Are you staying for lunch too?" Bella hesitated, then nodded. "If your dad doesn't mind." Liam looked at both of them. The heavy weight in his chest shifted slightly. "Sure. Why not?" They sat together on an old utility bench. Mason eagerly unwrapped sandwiches while narrating his new blueprint for a solar-powered toy helicopter. Liam listened, one hand absently checking a rotor cap beside him. Bella leaned forward, genuinely curious. Mason beamed. And when it's done, I want to test it on the roof." Liam chuckled. "You planning on flying a rescue mission up there?" The boy shrugged. "Maybe. You never know when someone's gonna need saving." Bella caught Liam's eyes. "Smart kid." Liam nodded. "Too smart." After lunch, Mason scampered off to draw on the concrete, with chalk humming to himself. Bella leaned back. "He's your anchor." "He's the only reason I didn't disappear into this hangar," Liam said quietly. "Every morning I wake up and remember. The sky took Evelyn, but he's the reason I'm still standing on the ground." Bella looked over at the Black Hawk. "And yet you're here, restoring an engine that nearly took everything from you." Liam didn't answer right away. He walked over to the cockpit and reached beneath the control panel. With a soft click, he opened a compartment and pulled out an old dog tag on a frayed chain. He held it up. It wasn't his. It was Evelyn's. "I buried the metal," he said softly, "but not this." Bella stepped forward, her voice almost a whisper. "Do you think she'd want you to stop flying forever?" Liam closed his hand around the tag. "I don't know what she'd want, but I know what I've been afraid of. And what's that? That if I went back up there, I wouldn't come back down." Bella looked at him for a long moment. "Then maybe it's time you chose to fly for someone who's still here." She nodded toward Mason. Liam followed her gaze. His son had drawn a large helicopter on the floor, chalk rotors spinning across the concrete. Beneath it, in block letters, "My dad is a hero." Liam's chest tightened. The boy hadn't seen battle, hadn't read reports, didn't know about classified missions or combat losses. He only knew that his father was someone who fixed broken things and made them whole again. That night, long after the hangar emptied, Liam remained beside the old Black Hawk. He placed Evelyn's dog tag gently on the dashboard. Then, with trembling fingers, he turned the ignition key. The engine coughed, then roared to life. Dust scattered, lights flickered, and somewhere deep inside the machine, somewhere between grief and grace, something old began to breathe again. It was the kind of morning that promised storms. Thick clouds rolled low over Fort West Point, darkening the sky, like a mood, long buried, but ready to break. Inside the Operations Command Center, the air was just as tense. Major Bella Monroe stood at attention, arms clasped behind her back, jaw locked tight. Across the room, seated at the end of a long table lined with senior officers, was Brigadier General Marcus Harlan, her superior, her former mentor, and the man whose approval she had once craved like oxygen. But today, there was no trace of warmth in his stare. "Explain to me," he began, voice low but thunderous in its restraint, "why I have reports that the Black Hawk in Hangar 6 was powered up without authorization by a civilian." Bella didn't blink. "Because that civilian was once a Night Stalker, and he still flies better than anyone on this base." A murmur rippled through the room. General Harlan's eyes narrowed. "I gave you direct orders to ground that aircraft until further notice. With respect, sir, your order came after the engine was already started." "Don't split hairs with me, Monroe. I'm not sir," she said evenly. "I'm standing by my decision." He leaned forward. "You've compromised protocol, allowed a civilian with a sealed discharge file to access sensitive hardware, and now you're defending him like he's your golden boy." Bella's voice didn't waver. "He's not my golden boy, sir. He's a man who once risked his life for this country, and whose service has been quietly buried, because it's easier to forget what we owe him." Silence fell over the table. General Harlan pushed back his chair, slowly standing. "Do you even know why Brooks was discharged?" he asked, tone edged with something more personal now. "Do you know what happened the night he lost his wife?" Bella nodded. "I've read the logs, and I've spoken to him. Then you should know better than to parade him around like some war hero trying to relive his glory days." "I'm not parading him, sir," she said. But maybe it's time this base remembered that people like Liam Brooks don't just vanish because we're uncomfortable with their pain. A long pause. Harlan's face twitched barely, but enough for Bella to notice. The hands behind his back flexed. He didn't raise his voice. Dismissed. Bella saluted, turned sharply, and walked out without a word. But she knew something in her had struck a nerve. Later that afternoon, whispers floated through the hallways like smoke. Officers muttered about the janitor pilot, while others debated Bella's sudden insubordination. Some admired it. Others saw it as reckless. Inside Hangar 6, Liam Brooks was unaware of the gathering storm. He crouched beneath the belly of a grounded UH-60L Black Hawk eyes, focused on a stubborn fuel line clamp. Across from him, Mason was sitting cross-legged with a notebook in his lap, sketching rotor blades and engine diagrams with fierce concentration. "You ever think about flying again?" Dad Mason asked, not looking up. Liam paused. "All the time." "Then why don't you?" He sat back, wiping his hands. "Because some people think once you fall, you don't deserve to get back up." Mason frowned. "That's dumb." Liam smiled. "Yeah, sometimes it is." That's when the hangar doors opened. Bella stepped inside her uniform, wrinkled from hours of meetings, but her eyes sharp. She walked with purpose, a paper folder in one hand. Mason lit up. "Major Monroe." "Hey, kiddo," she said, patting his head gently. Then she turned to Liam. "We need to talk." He stood. "You in trouble?" She handed him the folder. "We both might be." He opened it slowly. Inside was a printed transcript, his discharge summary, redacted portions now unredacted. The final line read, "Honorably discharged, under Article 4 Sepoy Psychological Medical Grounds, following trauma-induced flight refusal after death of spouse during active mission." Liam looked up, eyes narrowing. "How did you get this? I requested a review through the General's office. I also submitted a motion for records clearance." He stared at her. "That file was sealed for a reason." "I know, and I respect that. But you don't deserve to be a ghost in your own story, Liam." He closed the folder. "What did Harlan say?" "He called you a liability. Said the past doesn't belong in the cockpit. And what did you say I said the past is exactly why you should be there?" They stared at each other for a long beat. The tension between them wasn't just military anymore. It was something deeper, more fragile. Liam glanced toward Mason, who had gone back to sketching. "If I fly again, it won't be because of redemption. Or records." Bella nodded. "Then fly for him." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, the base fell into a kind of hush that only military towns know, the calm between drills, the silence before reveille. Inside the officers' lounge, General Harlan stood alone, sipping lukewarm coffee, gazing out the window at the runway. A voice interrupted him. "You trained her well, sir." He turned to see Colonel Jennings, his longtime aide. Harlan gave a small grunt. "Too well." "She challenged you," Jennings said. "She challenged the system," Harlan replied. "And the system doesn't like being challenged." Jennings stepped forward. "Do you remember Operation Iron Shroud?" Harlan's jaw tightened. "I do. You signed off on Brooks's mission that day, and you overrode the engine red flag, didn't you?" Harlan's hand clenched around the coffee cup. "I did what I had to do. We were losing ground. We needed every asset in the air, and we lost his wife for it." The silence was suffocating. Jennings' continued voice softer. "You never blamed yourself. You buried him instead." Harlan turned away. "Because if I had admitted what I knew, what I ignored, it would have brought the whole command under scrutiny." Jennings said nothing. Harlan looked out again toward the hangars, where a lone figure could be seen walking across the tarmac. Liam Brooks, mop in one hand, the other in his pocket, head bowed. He was one of the best, Harlan said hoarsely. We broke him. Maybe Jennings replied, but his kid's still drawing helicopters, so maybe we didn't break all of him. That night, back at the maintenance bay, Liam stared at the folded transcript on his bench. He didn't cry, but his hand hovered over the old flight helmet he hadn't touched in years. Slowly, he lifted it, brushed off the dust, and set it on the table next to Mason's newest drawing, a smiling stick figure pilot in a Black Hawk captioned, "My Dad Flies Again." Liam whispered to the empty room, "Maybe it's time." Saturday morning arrived with an unexpected softness. The storm had passed. Rays of sunlight spilled gently across the rooftops of Fort West Point, casting long golden shadows that danced over the quiet sidewalks. For once, even the base's PA system seemed to lower its voice, as if reluctant to disturb the calm. Inside a modest two-bedroom apartment just off the perimeter fence, Mason Brooks stood on his tiptoes at the kitchen table, tongue poking out the corner of his mouth as he carefully placed the finishing touches on a handmade card. Crayon streaks curved across the paper like jet trails. At the top were 3 stick figures, one tall with messy hair and a green jacket, one with long dark hair and a stern smile, and a third in the middle, small but beaming with a speech bubble that read, "You made my dad smile again." Satisfied, Mason slipped the drawing into a manila folder already stuffed with photos, hand-scribbled notes, and his latest invention, a blueprint for a homemade rotor system color-coded by optimism. Then he grabbed his jacket and sprinted down the hall. "Dad," he called, "Major Monroe's coming for lunch." From the back bedroom, Liam Brooks emerged, wearing a simple gray t-shirt and jeans, casual, but somehow still military in posture. His eyes were a little tired, but softer these days, like someone learning to exhale after years of holding breath. She said that Liam asked, rubbing his stubble. Mason nodded proudly. "I invited her yesterday. Gave her the time, the gate code, everything." Liam raised an eyebrow. "And you cleared this with me," when Mason shrugged. "Didn't have to. She's part of the team now." Liam stared at him for a second, then laughed a short, honest burst that made Mason beam. "You planning to be a commander someday?" Liam asked. "Nope," Mason grinned. "I'm already one." Bella arrived just past noon, dressed down in a navy windbreaker and Jean's hair pulled into a low ponytail that made her look years younger than the woman who stood stone-faced in war rooms. In her hands was a paper bag filled with deli sandwiches and a tub of potato salad that had clearly never seen combat. Liam met her at the door. "You didn't have to bring anything," he said. She raised a brow. "It was either this or a bottle of scotch, and I wasn't sure what kind of lunch Mason had in mind." He chuckled. "Probably both." Inside the apartment was modest, but alive books stacked near the couch toy helicopters dangling from ceiling hooks, a chalkboard wall filled with scribbles like "Altitude, Confound Hope," and "Wind speed doesn't scare heroes." Bella looked around, eyes scanning the living room like a recon map. "You've built him a world," she said softly. Liam followed her gaze. "I didn't build it. I just hold the flashlight while he draws it." They settled at the table as Mason unpacked the lunch bag like a quartermaster, preparing a mission briefing. As they ate, the boy recounted every detail of his week, how he reconfigured a toy helicopter to use solar panels from an old calculator, how he learned the difference between cyclic and collective controls, and how his newest design would probably win NASA's admiration if only they'd check their inbox. Bella laughed more that afternoon than she had in weeks. There was something infectious about Mason's imagination, boundless, unfiltered, yet rooted in the kind of hope that only came from watching someone you love try again. As they cleared the dishes, Mason darted into his room and returned with the overstuffed manila folder. He placed it on Bella's lap. "I made this for you." She looked up, surprised. "For me?" He nodded. Because you helped fix my dad. Bella opened it carefully. Inside were the pictures, the drawings, the blueprints, and the card. She stared at it for a long moment, fingers trembling slightly as she ran them over the crayon figures. A lump rose in her throat. Liam noticed his voice gentle. He doesn't say things lightly. Bella cleared her throat. Neither do I. Mason climbed onto the couch, feet dangling. I was thinking, he said, maybe you could stay. Not just today, but be around more. Bella blinked. Mason, you don't have to be like my mom, he said quickly. But I think my dad needs someone to fly with. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, yes, but sacred too. Liam walked to the window, hands in his pockets. Outside, a pair of cadets jogged by in the sunlight. Somewhere in the distance, a helicopter rumbled in the sky, the sound used to tighten his chest. Now it stirred something else. I spent years believing I didn't deserve the cockpit, Liam said, eyes still out the window. That the engine's roar meant guilt, not grace. Bella stood slowly, and now he turned to her. Now I think maybe it's time I stop flying alone. Mason jumped to his feet, pumping a fist. Yes! Bella laughed, wiping a tear discreetly. Well, Commander Mason, I guess we have our next mission. She glanced at Liam. You sure? He nodded. I've been grounded long enough. That night, the three of them returned to Hangar 6. The Black Hawk was bathed in amber light from overhead sodium lamps, its body gleaming like something holy. Mason climbed into the rear seat, strapping himself in with the seriousness of a co-pilot. Bella took the left seat beside Liam. He handed her a headset. You ever flown co-pilot? He asked. She smirked. You ever flown with a backseat commander? The engines roared to life, the rotors spinning into a blur, their rhythm pulsing like a second heartbeat. Liam's fingers moved over the controls with the elegance of memory, but not haunted now. Steady. Present. The helicopter lifted. And as they rose into the sky together, father, son, and the woman who reminded them both how to reach upward. Mason's voice crackled through the comms. Altitude, awesome. Heading, hope. Bella laughed. Liam smiled. And for the first time in years, the sky didn't feel like something he'd lost. It felt like home. The next Monday began like most others. Drills at dawn, cadets running laps in cadence, the smell of machine oil hanging in the air like a second uniform. But in the corner office of the Regional Command Building, a storm was quietly brewing. Major Bella Monroe sat at her desk reviewing her inbox when a knock came, not timid, not forceful, but deliberate. It was Captain Avery McLean, her former Academy classmate, and now a strategic analyst embedded at the Pentagon. Bella raised an eyebrow. Didn't expect to see you outside D.C., much less before coffee. Avery stepped in her boots, clicking against the tile. Let's just say someone in a dark suit flagged your name on a flight roster and got curious. Word travels fast when a grounded Night Stalker starts engines again. Bella leaned back. You came all this way to scold me? No, Avery said, closing the door behind her. I came to give you this. She pulled a slim brown envelope from inside her uniform and slid it across the desk. It bore no markings, no official seal, just the faint handwritten label, Brooks Liam A. Incident Archive, do not disseminate. Bella stared at it. I thought the file was sealed, she said. It was, Avery replied. Until someone noticed a discrepancy in the mission log related to the evac window you signed 6 years ago. Bella's pulse quickened. Avery continued. They thought you'd buried it, but someone else buried it for you. Bella opened the envelope slowly, almost reverently. Inside were 3 items: a redacted mission debrief, a technical report on engine failure, and a signed addendum. She scanned the first page. The language was cold, clinical, detailing the flight path, weather interference, tactical urgency, and resulting crash. But it was the second document that caught her eye, a maintenance override form time-stamped the day before the mission. The box next to critical wear warning had been checked. The engine wasn't just risky, it had failed preliminary diagnostics. Her stomach turned. "Who signed this override?" Avery tapped the page. At the bottom, barely legible in the scan, Maje. Jenner Marcus Harlan Bella sat back in stunned silence. Her voice, when it came, was hoarse. He knew the engine was compromised. Avery nodded. He overwrote it anyway. And when the crash happened, the inquiry was diverted. They pinned the consequence on Liam's trauma, discharged him under psychological grounds to shut the door quietly. Bella clenched her jaw. They destroyed a man's life to protect a general's decision. And your signature, Avery added softly, was on the original evac request. You were an accessory, but an unknowing one. The folder slipped from Bella's fingers. She stared out the window, the Black Hawk on the helipad, now looking less like a machine and more like a grave marker. I need to tell him, she said. Avery placed a hand on hers. He deserves to know. But so do others. Bella turned back. What do you mean, if you want to clear his name? You'll need to bring this public. Bella's throat tightened. That means going up against Harlan. Avery nodded. You ready for that? Bella didn't answer right away. Her fingers traced the edge of the envelope. Then she stood. I was there when his life broke, she said. It's time I stand beside him when the truth gets put back together. That evening, Bella found Liam at the helipad arms, folded watching cadets run pre-flight simulations. The wind tousled his hair as the sun dipped behind the mountains. He looked over as she approached. You've got that. I read something I wasn't supposed to look. She didn't smile. I need to show you something, she said. They walked in silence back to Hangar 6, where Mason had already fallen asleep on the cot in the back room, curled beside a half-built helicopter model. Bella set the file on the workbench. Liam stared at it, then at her. What's this? The truth, she said. He opened the envelope slowly. As he read, his face hardened. Not with rage, he'd known pain long enough to keep it from boiling, but with something colder. Something that had waited years for confirmation. When he reached the final page, he placed the papers down with precise care. I knew the engine wasn't right, he said. I felt it. Evelyn asked me that morning if I trusted the bird. I told her yes, because I had to believe the chain of command wouldn't hang me out to dry. Bella's voice was barely audible. Harlan signed the override. Liam nodded once. Of course he did. Silence settled. I'm going public with it, Bella said. I'm filing an official complaint. I have the support of a few officers who still have a conscience. He looked at her surprised. You'd risk your career. She met his gaze. You risked your life and lost more than anyone should have. You deserve to be seen again for who you were and who you still are. Liam's throat tightened. For a man who'd learned to bury emotion under steel and silence, the crack in his voice was seismic. I've lived with this shadow so long, I forgot what daylight felt like. Bella stepped forward, her voice gentle. Then let's open the windows. 2 days later, a memo hit the inboxes of Fort West Point's upper chain formal ethics complaint, filed against Major General Marcus Harlan. Attached was the file now fully unsealed, accompanied by a joint statement, signed by Major Bella Monroe and Captain Avery McLean, requesting an internal tribunal. The effect was immediate. Whispers turned into briefings. Schedules cleared. Lawyers appeared. But what no one expected, what stunned the command court into silence, was when Liam Brooks himself walked into the hearing room, wearing his old flight jacket, his veteran ID pinned proudly over his heart, and stood before the panel. "I was never broken," he said. "I was buried." The room didn't breathe. And I'm done being silent. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited. Inside, Liam stood taller than he had in years. Bella joined him afterward in the corridor. They didn't say much. They didn't have to. As they stepped into the sunlight, Mason ran up the steps to meet them holding a new drawing. This time, it showed a courtroom. At the center stood Liam, not alone, but flanked by Bella and Mason. Above them, he'd written in careful block letters, "Truth takes flight, too." Liam crouched, hugging his son tightly. Then he looked up at Bella. "You said the past is why I should fly again," he whispered. She nodded. He smiled softly. "I think I just did." The storm came in with the kind of ferocity that seemed almost theatrical, as if the heavens themselves had decided to bear witness. Thunder rolled over Fort West Point, low and unending, while rain battered the hangars with merciless rhythm. Inside Hangar 6, a single light glowed through the haze, flickering against metal walls and oil-streaked floors. Liam Brooke sat on a wooden crate, elbows on his knees, the dim bulb above him casting a circle of weary gold around his face. He hadn't moved for nearly an hour. The tribunal hearing had ended that afternoon, but the echo of it hadn't stopped reverberating in his chest. The truth was out now, at least the part that mattered. General Harlan's override order had been confirmed. Evelyn's death wasn't an accident of fate. It was the result of arrogance and ambition stamped with a signature. Justice was coming. But peace. Peace was something else entirely. He heard footsteps long before he saw her. They were slow, deliberate, and soaked with rain. Liam came a quiet voice behind him. He didn't look up. "You shouldn't be here, Major." Bella Monroe stepped into the light, her uniform damp, her hair slicked against her cheeks. There was exhaustion in her eyes, but also resolve the kind that only comes after you've ripped off a bandage and seen what's underneath. "I came because I owed you something," she said. "You already gave me enough," he replied. "You gave me truth. That's not the same as forgiveness." He exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "Forgiveness is for people who still believe the past can be rewritten." She took another step closer, her voice trembling slightly. Maybe not rewritten, but understood. Liam finally looked up. "What are you trying to say?" Bella swallowed hard. "I didn't tell you everything." The air shifted. The rain's tempo seemed to slow, as if the world leaned in to listen. She continued, voice barely above a whisper. "When the mission orders came in 6 years ago, I wasn't just a staff aide. I was acting deputy for operations. The maintenance override form came across my desk first." Liam's brows knit together, confusion darkening into realization. "I saw the red flag," she said, tears welling despite her composure. "I saw the warning about the engine fatigue. I should have stopped it. But General Harlan pushed the priority clearance, said delays would compromise lives on the ground. And she faltered. I signed it through. I didn't even question him. I just trusted the chain of command." The silence that followed was brutal, the kind of silence that burns more than shouting ever could. Liam's jaw tightened. He looked away, his voice low. "So you were the one who gave that bird the green light?" Bella nodded. "Yes." He stood slowly, every movement, deliberate, controlled. "You were the reason Evelyn was on that flight." Her tears finally broke free. "Yes," she whispered. The storm outside roared. "I thought I was protecting the mission," she said through trembling lips. "But all I protected was a system that fed on obedience. I didn't just sign a form, Liam, I signed away a life I never even met. And I've carried it every single day since." Liam turned, pacing toward the far wall. His reflection in the glass of the idle Blackhawk stared back at him, a man torn between fury and grief, between the instinct to hate and the exhaustion of having hated too long. "I don't know what you want me to say," he said finally. "I don't have forgiveness left to give." "I don't want it," Bella said, stepping closer. "Not tonight. Maybe not ever. I just couldn't keep standing next to you without you knowing who I really am." He laughed bitterly. "Who you are." "Yes," she said firmly. "Someone who failed you, and someone who's trying to make it right, even if it's too late." Lightning flashed, filling the hangar with stark, momentary brightness. When it faded, the two stood in near darkness, again, shapes carved in shadow. Liam's voice broke the silence. "You think truth heals everything," she said quietly. "But it's the only thing strong enough to carry the pain." He stared at her, then at the floor, the storm raging beyond the hangar doors. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then slowly, Liam walked back to the crate and sat down again. His voice softened low and distant. "Evelyn used to say the same thing." Bella blinked through her tears. "What?" He smiled faintly, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was a memory escaping its cage. She said secrets rot faster than bodies. That truth hurts less than living in the dark. He looked up at Bella again. "I wanted to hate you just now. God knows I tried. But somehow, all I feel is tired." Her tears fell freely. "Then let me be tired with you." She sat beside him, the rain still thrumming like static above. For a few minutes, neither spoke. The thunder softened into a hum, the storm settling into a mournful lullaby. Finally, Bella whispered, "I keep asking myself what Evelyn would think of me." Liam's gaze drifted upward. "She'd probably tell you the same thing she told me before every flight. Don't let the sky decide who you are." Bella's voice cracked. "And who are you now, Liam?" He exhaled deeply, the breath shaking out years of pain. A man learning how to stand on solid ground again. They sat there in silence until the rain eased to a drizzle. Outside, the first hints of dawn began to creep through the clouds, bleeding pale light into the hangar. It touched the side of the old Black Hawk, tracing the scratches along its fuselage, like scars being kissed by morning. Bella stood and wiped her face. "There's a tribunal follow-up tomorrow. Harlan's stepping down before they force him to. He'll never face trial, but the record's clean now. You've been reinstated for honorary flight status." Liam looked at her in disbelief. "What?" "It's not much," she admitted. "But it's something." He stood slowly. "You did that I owed you," that she said simply. He studied her for a long moment. Then, without thinking, he reached out and brushed a raindrop, or maybe a tear, from her cheek. "You don't owe me any more, Bella." She smiled faintly. "Maybe not. But I'm not done trying." He glanced toward the helicopter. "Then maybe it's time to stop running from the ghosts." As if on cue, the rising sun pierced through the clouds, lighting up the hangar in soft, forgiving gold. Bella turned to leave her voice steady but gentle. "You know, when I first joked about marrying you, if you could fly that helicopter, I never thought I'd actually see the man who could lift the sky." He chuckled quietly. "You're not the only one surprised." She smiled one last time and walked out into the dawn. Liam stood there, the hangar alive with morning light, the rain now just a memory. He ran a hand across the helicopter's hull, whispering softly to the ghost that still lived there. "Rest easy, Evie." The truth finally found its way home. And for the first time in 6 years, when the wind carried the echo of the rotors, it didn't sound like guilt. It sounded like grace. The wind howled through Fort West Point, like a living thing, rattling metal shutters and bending the tall pine trees along the fence line. Storm warnings lit up every console. The base was on high alert. Level 3 emergency protocol, as an unexpected low-pressure system from the coast had grown teeth overnight. What had started as light showers turned into a rapidly forming squall line. Evacuation orders had been issued for a forward ranger team stationed in the mountain training zone northeast of the base. Their access road had washed out. Radio contact was fading. A medevac chopper had been dispatched. And then the pilot went down. Captain Whitley, a young but capable flyer, had been en route when a gust pushed his Black Hawk sideways into a tree line. The bird crash-landed thankfully without casualties, but it left the evac mission without a pilot and only one airframe left available on short notice. Inside the control tower, panic brewed beneath the calm. Bella Monroe stared at the live radar feed, jaw clenched. The evacuation clock ticked down, and the storm front was closing in. The evac team had injured personnel, dwindling supplies, and zero visibility. The only chance of getting them out alive now rested in the shadow of a long-forgotten hangar and a man everyone once counted out. She picked up the radio. In Hangar 6, Liam Brooks was already awake. He hadn't slept much. The night before had been too heavy, too filled with ghosts laid bare and truths finally spoken. But there was peace in the wait now, a steady kind that came with release, not burden. He stood in the pre-dawn haze staring at the old Black Hawk. His hands were gloved boots, laced. The flight suit was the same one he hadn't worn since the day his world changed, but now it fit him like it always had. Like a second skin, weathered, but ready. The hangar doors opened suddenly with a mechanical groan. Bella entered wind, tugging at her jacket eyes locked onto his. "Liam, I heard the alert," he said. "You don't have a pilot." "No." "And the bird's ready," Bella nodded. "I had Alvarez run diagnostics at 400. Fully fueled weather mod nav installed comms resynced." He exhaled through his nose, then looked at her. "Say it out loud." She met his gaze. "I'm asking you to fly again." He stared at her for a beat. Not for pride. Not for proving anything. "No," she said quietly. "For them. For the ones waiting in the dark." He turned to the helicopter, running a hand over the cool metal skin. Then he walked toward the side locker and retrieved his helmet. As he fastened the chin strap, Bella stepped closer. "I'll be co-pilot," she said. I pulled the clearance. Liam looked at her with the faintest smile. "You sure about that, Major?" She smiled back. "I trust your hands more than I trust the sky." Moments later, the rotors roared to life. The base fell silent as Black Hawk 05 rose into the storm-dark sky. In the control tower, techs and commanders watched the radar feed like it was a heartbeat monitor. The weather was worsening gusts, over 70 knots visibility under 400 feet, but the Black Hawk climbed with purpose, steady against the chaos. Inside the cockpit, Liam's hands moved across the controls with calm precision. Every switch flicked, every gauge, monitored every instinct sharpened by years of muscle memory, and one burning clarity this mattered. Bella kept her eyes on the terrain radar. "We're approaching grid Lima 2. Their beacon's faint, but I've got a lock." "Copy that," Liam replied. "We'll set down in the clearing to the south. Trees will shield one side, but we'll have wind shear on approach. I'll adjust the throttle. You keep her level." He looked over at her. "We're not flying solo anymore, remember?" Bella nodded, fingers dancing across the dials. Through the cockpit glass, the world outside was a blur of gray and green forest. Below storm, above lightning flashing like war drums in the distance. Visual on the ranger team, Bella called out. "Orange flares at 10 o'clock. Liam banked left, guiding the Black Hawk into a descending arc, fighting the crosswinds like an artist shaping clay. The downdraft fought back the rain slamming against the windshield. "I need you to talk to me, Bella," he said evenly. "Read me ground elevation. Talk to me like I'm deaf to the storm." She focused, voice steady. 500 feet. Descending. Trees at 40 meters. West gusts at 65. Rotate 2 degrees right. Altitude, Hold. Now drop. He obeyed without hesitation. The bird lowered through the clearing like a falling feather, controlled, deliberate, graceful in defiance of the storm's rage. The wheels hit mud with a jolt, the struts groaning but holding firm. "We're down," Liam announced. Within seconds, the rear ramp dropped. The ranger team emerged from the forest like ghosts. 4 soldiers, 2 of them helping a third who limped heavily. Bella jumped out to help them board, motioning with practiced clarity. Liam watched through the side mirror, scanning the tree line. Thunder cracked again, closer this time. The moment the last man was secured, Bella tapped the cabin wall. "Go." Liam throttled up. As the Blackhawk lifted, a sudden gust slammed into the side, causing the bird to tilt. Bella grabbed the rail, barking stabilizers on it. Liam leaned into the torque, adjusting for drag, lifting them clear of the trees with inches to spare. The airframe groaned, but the engines roared back in protest, and then, like a knife cutting through silk, they broke through the top of the cloud bank. Above the storm, the sky was impossibly still. Blue, bright, quiet. Bella leaned back, letting out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Liam glanced at her. "You all right?" She laughed, shaky but genuine. "You still fly like the storm owes you something." He smirked. "It does." They returned to base 20 minutes later. The evac team was rushed to medical, but they'd all survive. No casualties. Not this time. As Liam powered down the rotors, the tower lit up with radio chatter. Applause, commendations, calls from brass. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the look on Mason's face when he sprinted into the hangar and leapt into his father's arms, eyes wide with pride. "You flew," the boy whispered. "You really flew." Liam hugged him tightly. "I told you sometimes the sky gives second chances." And nearby, Bella stood, watching, arms crossed, heart full, not with victory, but with grace. The sun dipped low over Fort West Point, painting the sky in soft gold and fire orange. After days of windstorms and courtroom reckonings, the world had finally grown still quiet, as if catching its breath. At the edge of the tarmac, Liam Brooks stood alone. He wore his old flight jacket zipped halfway up the frayed edges, still carrying the faint smell of oil and rain. In his hands, he held a worn helmet, not polished, not ceremonial, just real. Used. Lived in. Behind him, the last of the cadets finished their drills. Marching feet faded into the distance as the base shifted from duty to dusk. This time, there were no orders, no urgent rescue, no tribunal. Just one man, one helicopter, and a promise whispered long ago. A voice broke the silence, soft, steady. "She's ready." Bella Monroe approached from behind clipboard, under her arm wind catching the edge of her jacket. The sunset made her eyes appear amber warmer than he remembered. "She'll fly," Liam asked, gesturing toward the refurbished Blackhawk. "She'll do more than that," Bella said with a half-smile. "We replaced the main rotor. Alvarez triple-checked the hydraulics. Navigation's crystal. She's not a ghost anymore, Liam. She's waiting." Liam looked at the bird for a long moment, then back at her. "You came," he said. She nodded. "Didn't want you to fly this one alone." A pause. Then Bella added more softly, "And I have something for you." She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small black box, handing it to him wordlessly. Liam opened it. Inside lay a pair of silver pilot wings, newly minted. Below them, engraved on a narrow plaque, was a single line, LT. "Liam Brooks, Night Stalker. Sky never forgot you." He stared at it in stunned silence. "They cleared your record," she said. "Honorable reinstatement. Posthumous commendation for Evelyn. And you've been offered a training advisory role for the aviation cadets, if you want it." Liam blinked slowly, emotion cresting like a tide. "I never thought," he began, but the words caught in his throat. Bella smiled gently. "The sky remembers Liam, even when we try to forget." He closed the box with trembling hands, then looked back toward the aircraft. "Come with me," he asked. "I thought you'd never ask," she said. Inside the cockpit, the world felt different. Familiar, but not haunted. Bella settled into the co-pilot seat as Liam ran through the startup sequence. His fingers moved fluidly across the switches, each click echoing like an affirmation. No longer hesitation, only quiet command. "Fuel at 75. Battery engaged." "Nav-link locked," he said calmly. "Roger," Bella replied. "Airspace is clear. Winds light. Sunset on R6. The rotors began to spin slowly at first, then faster, until they blurred into a steady halo of motion. The Black Hawk lifted. They rose into the sky like a prayer finally answered. Below, the base shrank into quiet order. Buildings, lights, hangars, roads. All the things that once boxed Liam into a world he no longer trusted. But up here, the air was clean. Up here, he belonged again. They flew east toward the edge of the forest, where the tree line met the ridgeline. Evelyn's favorite place, the place Liam used to fly over, just to hear her voice rise in awe when the sun lit the mountains. Bella glanced over. "You okay?" Liam didn't answer right away. He just stared forward, then finally whispered, Yeah, I am." He guided the helicopter into a gentle hover above a lake that shimmered below like a silver coin. Then, reaching into his jacket, he pulled out a single dog tag, Evelyn's. "I brought her with me," he said. "One last flight." Bella looked away, trying to blink back the tears forming at the corners of her eyes. Liam opened the cockpit window slightly. The wind rushed in. With one long breath, he kissed the tag and let it fall. It tumbled down through the light, spinning slowly, until it touched the surface of the lake, then vanished beneath the reflection of the setting sun. Neither of them spoke. There was no need. This was closure not spoken but felt. When they returned, the base was nearly dark. Only a few lights remained on near the control tower. The Black Hawk touched down like a feather, its rotors slowing to stillness in the twilight. Liam powered down the systems and sat in silence for a moment, staring out the window. Then he turned to Bella. "Thank you for everything." She looked at him and smiled. "It wasn't just me. You flew yourself back." As they climbed out, a small figure ran toward them from the far corner of the hangar. Mason, pajama pants tucked into his boots, clutching a folded piece of paper in one hand. "Dad," he called out breathlessly. "I saw you. I watched the whole flight from the tower window." Liam crouched to catch him, lifting the boy into a hug. Mason laughed into his father's shoulder, then pulled back, opening the paper. "I finished it," he said proudly. It was the drawing, the one he'd been working on for days. Now completed, showed a helicopter soaring into the sky, sunlight behind it. Inside, 3 figures, Liam, Bella, and Mason. Beneath it, in large block letters, he had written, "The sky always forgives." Liam looked at it for a long time. Then he looked up at Bella. "Do you think it does?" he asked. She stepped beside him, placing a hand on his back. "I think it already has," she said. They stood there, father, son, and the woman who refused to let either of them be forgotten, bathed in the last light of a long day. Above them, the clouds parted one final time, and in the wide-open sky, there was no judgment. Only room to fly again. We'd love to know where you're watching from today, whether it's a quiet porch in Tennessee, a small town in Oregon, or somewhere far across the ocean. Your presence here means the world to us. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, please consider subscribing to Soul Moment Story. Every click helps us share more tales of courage, kindness, and the quiet heroes that often go unseen. And from all of us behind the scenes, thank you for spending this time with us. Until the next story, stay kind, stay strong, and never stop believing in second chances.